Hi and welcome back to ScottiesTech.Info. I'm Scotty with my co-host Cletus. I've made a lot of videos talking about smartphones and privacy, and I've talked about dumb phones are kind of better than smartphones because you get a dumb phone with KaiOS, for example. There's less googly stuff. There are fewer sensors. The phones have less power, so they can't do all the kind of fancy tracking and stuff. I made another video about Lineage OS, which is basically a custom version of Android that you can install on your existing smartphone if you have the technical know-how. And all of these things are basically to minimize the googliness or the Amazoniness, the big data part of having a smartphone, so that you can have increased privacy and increased peace of mind. But it turns out that there is actually another threat to our privacy, and it has nothing at all to do with the phone or really its operating system. So back in on December 19th of 2019, just a few months ago, the New York Times released an article, and the article was called "One Nation Tracked, an investigation into the smartphone tracking industry from New York Times opinion." This is actually a 7-part, it's a sort of a series of 7 articles, and it's actually quite interesting. You should probably read it. I'll link to that down in the description, but I'll give kind of a quick summary here. So what happened was they started this thing called the Privacy Project, and the reason they started it was because they obtained a data file of 50 billion location pings. These location pings were basically from Americans' smartphones, 12 million Americans. Their smartphones would send a ping off to a certain company. And each of these pings that a specific person's device sent out, those pings were basically grouped together in the data file. So there was no real identifying information, but they had pings from specific smartphones. 12 million Americans between 2016 and 2017, they obtained this data anonymously, and they got it from a location data company. Now, if you don't know what a location data company is, it's one of these guys. You probably don't recognize any of those names. The only one that I recognized was Foursquare. That's a pretty well-known company. The other ones you've probably never heard of, and neither have I. So these location data companies, what they do is their entire business, sometimes part of their business, most of them are literally in the location data business. What they do is they buy and sell location data that gets sent from your smartphone and my smartphone. So how it works is you have apps, and you have maybe like an innocuous weather app. You know, it's just seemingly innocent. Maybe you have a news app, maybe you have a coupon app. And these apps have usually ads in there, and of course that's to generate ad revenue so that the people who program these apps can actually make some money. But there's another way that app developers make money, and that's by using certain SDKs. They are essentially approached and told, well, hey, if you use our SDK to develop a software development kit, if you use our SDK to develop your app, then for every, say, 1,000 people who use your app, we'll be kind of sucking up their location data, and we'll pay you like $20. So you get $20 per 1,000 users. Doesn't that sound great? And of course the app developer says, sure, that sounds great, because app developers need to make money. So even if you have many of these innocuous apps that don't necessarily need to access your location data, obviously, as you know, when you install many of them, it's saying, you know, can I access your location data? Can I access your contacts list? Blah, blah, blah. And of course you say yes, because you want to use the app. The minute you do that, say you install a weather app, you think that the weather app is just, of course it wants to access your location, right? I mean, so when you travel from New York to Denver, it knows that your location changed, and it can provide you local weather information. Well, yeah, that's what they use it for. But it's also used for sending these location pings off from your smartphone pretty much all the time whenever you're using your smartphone wherever you go. And that data is being collected by these location data companies. It is also being bought and sold by these location data companies. Now, of course, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, but this is anonymous data, because like I said, it's, yeah, okay, my device, it's associated with a certain ID, and sure, it's sending pings off to these companies, but it's not associated with my email address or my home address or anything like that, right? Well, technically, no. But what the authors of this New York Times article determined was that it's very often easy to determine who the pings from a specific phone belong to. So how that works is, let's say here we have a view of New York City, and okay, so you just, out of this data, you extract one set of pings. So okay, there you go. There's the pings from somebody's smartphone. Then you basically just kind of connect the dots, and you see there's a star on the left and a star on the right, and maybe you know that the star on the left is a workplace and the star on the right is a home address, and then suddenly you go, hang on a minute, that address is publicly available information, so I know who that is, and yeah, sure enough, he works at the other star on the left. That's his job, that's the company he works for, so I know who that is, that's Bob. So suddenly, now you know that's Bob's location data. And what the authors of the New York Times article found, in fact, was that it was often very, very easy, even though the data was technically anonymous, any tiny little extra bit of data that they could add to any group of location pings, very often they could identify exactly who the phone belonged to. In fact, they identified politicians and reporters and police officers and darn near everybody, actually. They even were able to identify someone in President Trump's entourage and thereby track the president's movements. And this is, of course, data that is being bought and sold by private companies, and these private location data companies are not regulated in any way, shape, or form. So, okay, well, you might say, well, yeah, but, you know, I mean, that doesn't seem so bad, and, well, yeah, I mean, where I go and what I do doesn't really matter, right? Maybe not. Maybe you don't care. But what the New York Times investigation also found was that they had a bunch of dots on their map around, for example, CIA headquarters. Now, of course, the CIA headquarters, when you take your phone inside, you either turn it off or they have fancy systems in place to ensure that no eavesdropping occurs. So there are no blips on their map inside the CIA headquarters. But what they found was that employees were leaving their smartphone on, they'd come to work in the morning, and the blip would go basically into the CIA parking lot, at which point it would disappear until the end of the day, and at the end of the workday, suddenly the blip would appear again in the CIA headquarters parking lot, and then it would start moseying back to a particular home address, day after day. So then they could figure out who those people were, they know who works for the CIA, they know when they arrive, when they leave, blah, blah, blah. So obviously you can see if these are private location data companies that are buying and selling this information to whoever will pay, yeah, we have much bigger problems than just you or I, you know, our location data, maybe not such a big deal, maybe you don't care about your privacy, but government officials, even the president, and these people can be tracked very easily in real time even, because this data is bought and sold and exchanged instantaneously. Yeah, that's probably not so good. But it's actually a little bit worse than that, because in addition to, okay, I've got my blips, and with one little bit of extra information like a home address, I can associate that with a person. It's actually worse than that, because smartphones and browsers also have this whole idea of a mobile advertising ID, which is actually associated with sort of your Google advertising ID. You can log into your Google account and you can say, stop showing me specific ads. If you have, like, say, an Android smartphone, you can go into the options and you can say, yeah, stop showing me customized ads, and supposedly that will turn off your mobile ad ID. But for most people, this mobile ad ID is kind of like a fingerprint that's being used to specifically show them certain ads and track their preferences and everything, and that can actually be associated with the location data. And in many cases, it can also be associated with a home address, which then gives them a phone number, which then gives them a name, and they know it's you. In fact, these sorts of systems are exactly why you'll be at dinner with a group of your friends, and you all have your smartphones, but you're not using them, but they're on. And of course, you have the whole "OK Google" feature activated, so it's listening to everything you say, waiting to see if, you know, you're talking to it, and it catches a little word or phrase of a certain product, and then your dinner ends, and you get home, and you hop on the internet, and suddenly it's showing you ads for the product that was mentioned during your dinner discussion. That's how they do this. It's all these different systems, not just location data. And this information is being bought and sold and flying around the internet, and yeah, that's how it works. But it can also be used for rather nefarious purposes. So, okay, at this point you're going, hang on a minute, did I agree to this? Did I really agree to this? And the answer to that question is yes, you did. Because you have things like privacy policies. Do you ever actually read the privacy policy? No, you don't. It's the fine print, it's legalese, and of course they just have to show you this stuff and you just click, okay, sure, go ahead. It's the same thing back with Gmail when it was released eons ago, and they said, sure, you can have a free webmail account and we'll give you a whopping 1 gigabyte of storage. And if you read the fine print, it said, right, but we're also going to read all of your emails and harvest search and advertising information from it. And of course you agreed to that because you wanted your webmail with your free 1 gig of storage, because at the time 1 gigabyte was a whole lot. But of course you pay for that somehow. So it's actually kind of interesting because, I've talked a lot before about, Google and Amazon and, the smart speakers and then the smartphones and the privacy and the tracking and even when your phone is in airplane mode, it's hoovering up metadata, and the next time you connect to the network, that data is shot off to Google so they can track what you're doing. But it's even worse than that, because it doesn't matter if you have a vanilla Android smartphone. It doesn't matter if you have an eFoundation phone, for example. It doesn't even matter if you have an iPhone, because everyone says, oh, but iPhones, they're super duper and they protect my privacy and they never do anything bad and they'll never give in to the government and give my encryption codes away and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't really matter, because many of the users in the New York Times article, they actually had iPhones. So you can't just protect yourself by being careful about the phone that you're using and the operating system that it's using, because the actual apps that are running on it very often have this location data thing going on. So yeah, you can have a perfectly secure smartphone, but if you install that one app, which can be something as innocent as a weather app or a coupon app, and you say, yes, I allow it to access my location data, you're basically tracked. And again, that data is not being controlled even by big data. They have nothing to do with it. It's actually these third-party companies, these location data companies, that are buying and selling it to whoever will pay. In fact, in the early days, there was just a handful of these location data companies, and now there are literally thousands of them, because they all saw this lucrative business opportunity and they jumped on the bandwagon. So how can you protect yourself? Well, obviously, sure, you might not want to do the full Google thing. You might want to you might just want to switch to like a dumb phone that uses KaiOS. That's a good step in the right direction. It doesn't solve the problem entirely, but it helps. Another thing you might want to do is use a smartphone with Lineage OS. If you have the technical know-how, you can install Lineage OS, you can get rid of all the googly stuff. That helps. It doesn't totally solve the problem, but it helps. A viewer wrote in and said, hey, did you hear about these eFoundation phones? And I had actually. They're, several $100, but you buy a smartphone and it comes with this eFoundation operating system, which is kind of like Lineage OS in that it's pre-de-Googled for you. But you don't have to have any of the technical know-how. You just go on their website, you order the dang thing, and when it arrives, it's already de-Googled, it's already secured for you, and of course it has automatic updates, so you can just buy one of those and you're kind of safe from Google. Sure, you can get an iPhone if you want, but again, above and beyond the fact that the operating system, the phone, that sort of thing is spying on you, beyond that, you also have to be sure that you're never saying, yes, I allow you to use my location data. I've tried to install apps before. It asks me like, I want access to your location, I want access to your contacts, I want access to all the files on your SD card, I want access to everything. And if you say no to any of those things, the app won't actually install. Those are the apps that you don't want to use, because if the app isn't really doing anything that requires all those permissions, then the only reason it wants those permissions is because they're going to be hoovering up as much data as possible to shoot it off to one of these companies or something similar to it, and then that data is being sold all over the place. So unless you really, really, really need that app, if it requests the permissions, especially location permissions, just say no. Finally, the best thing you can do is, if you don't need to have the phone with you at all times, don't take it with you, or at the very least, for convenience, if you do need to take the phone with you, don't have it on all the time. You can put it in airplane mode, or better yet, just turn it off. Turn the dang thing off. You're out and about. If you need to turn it on, you do, and then of course the location data isn't being sent off to these companies, and there you go. Right, so as I'm fond of saying, it's complicated. As the New York Times has revealed, Now we have location data companies. Got to worry about those too. Have to worry about the specific apps that we're installing and what those apps are doing, not just your operating system, not just the type of phone that it is. People are often asking me like, well, yeah, but if I use KaiOS, it's still got Google and I can't uninstall that stuff. And of course they're right, you can't. But it's kind of a question of degrees, and there's no one real thing that you can do where you're just going to do this one thing and like touch the button and all your problems are solved. It's kind of an ongoing thing, and you have to pay attention and continue learning about all these things and take little steps here and there. And it's all those little things that we can do bundled together that are actually going to improve privacy and anonymity on the internet with a smartphone, whatever. So yeah, that's the story about location data companies. As I said, you might want to check out the New York Times article. It's 7 parts, but it's actually a pretty quick read. There's a lot more data in there, and it was pretty darn interesting. So I'll put a link to that down in the description. And for more techie tips, see ScottiesTech.Info. Thanks for watching. See you next time.